suggesting something of a Tolkien character. He was the same age as Jenny, but seemed older. He'd been Jim and Dorothy's right-hand man for 10 years, but it felt like he'd always been here. Archie was one of Dorothy's strays. She had a habit of taking in lost souls, becoming an anchor in their lives. He had appeared one day to arrange his mother's funeral. Over the next month, he was often seen at cemeteries and cremations, crashing the funerals of strangers, trying to feel connected. At one, in Craigmillar Castle Park, Dorothy approached him with a proposition, and within 2 weeks he was driving the hearse in a suit, changing into overalls to hammer together coffins, eventually taking over the embalming under Jim's training. And Dorothy stuck by him when the details about his condition came to light. She sought a second opinion, kept an eye on his medication and therapy sessions, and trusted him around the place, which went a long way to saving his life. The same went for Indy, another stray who pitched up 3 years ago to bury her Hindu parents, dentists killed in a car accident, leaving behind a rudderless daughter. But Dorothy saw something in her, and a month later she was answering phones, gathering information from clients and sorting admin. Now she was training to become a funeral director in her own right. Meanwhile, she had slipped her way into Hannah's heart and persuaded her to move into the flat she'd been left by her mum and dad, 10 minutes walk away on Argyle Place. Jenny stared at her dad as he charred and shriveled, his essence mingling with the flames and smoke, dissipating into the universe. Part of her couldn't believe she would never hear his dumb jokes again, that terrible vampire accent he put on sometimes to talk about death, the way he would wink at her, his little girl, during services, at the most inappropriate moments, making her cover her mouth and leave the room she'd sneaked into because death was fascinating to kids. But that fascination waned. Being brought up around funerals began to take its toll. As a teenager, she distanced herself, left home as soon as she could, studied journalism, worked, fell in love with Craig, had Hannah, divorced Craig, all the time staying away from death as much as possible. But now death was back in her life. She looked around. Tall oaks and pines lined the far wall of the garden, blocking the neighbour's view. Over to her left was the open garage with the silver hearse parked inside, next to the workshop and embalming room. Those rooms adjoined the main house behind her, the large 3-storey Victorian sprawl that had been the Skelf family home for 100 years. It had doubled as a funeral director's for all that time, and a private investigator's for the last decade, the businesses taking up the ground floor, the family living on the 2 floors above. There was a rustle in the bushes to Jenny's right, and Schrödinger padded out from the foliage. The most recent of Dorothy's strays, Schrödinger was a ginger tabby with the wiry body of a street cat and a supreme air of confidence. The name was Hannah's idea, and it stuck. As he got closer, Jenny saw something in his mouth. A bird, flashes of red, white and black on the face, yellow under the wing. A goldfinch. Schrödinger never usually came near Jenny. She was a stranger round here. But he walked past the others and placed the finch at her feet. The cat glanced at the fire enveloping Jim's body, sucking the energy from him, then wandered back into the bushes. Jenny looked down at the goldfinch, blood smeared across the puncture wounds on its chest and throat. Another dead body to dispose of. She scooped it up in her hand and threw it onto the pyre, watching as its feathers burst into flames. She wiped the bird's blood on her jeans and breathed deeply. Chapter 2. Jenny. Dorothy raised her glass. To Jim. The 3 women clinked tumblers and sipped Highland Park. Jenny felt the burn as it went down. Any half-decent gin was her usual drink, but Dad loved whiskey, and this was for him. She placed her glass on the kitchen table and ran a finger over the grain of the oak, thought about the thousands of meals she'd eaten here as a kid. Dorothy took a gulp of whiskey and played with a clay dish in the middle of the table, something Hannah made at primary school with the yin and yang symbols on it. She made it for Dorothy, even back then interested in her grand's world view, the balance and connectedness of the world. The dish had a used-up tea light in it.